Welcome to episode 217 of Angela Watson's Truth for Teachers. I'm your host, Angela Watson, and I'm here to speak life, encouragement, and truth into the minds and hearts of educators and get you energized for the week ahead. Today, I'm going to share how to find a better feeling thought and then look for evidence that good things are happening. Visit truthforteachers.com to get the transcript or find our Truth for Teachers podcast community on Facebook. Support for this episode comes from my friends at Pear Deck. Pear Deck was founded by educators on a mission to help teachers create powerful learning moments for every student, every day. It gives teachers real-time insight into student thinking and understanding to seize those teachable moments. Better yet, Pear Deck's seamless integration with Google Slides and PowerPoint Online make it easy to build interactive presentations that help facilitate 100% student engagement. Pear Deck is giving Truth for Teachers listeners 90 days of Pear Deck Premium Access for free, no credit card required. Just head to peardeck.com/Truth for Teachers to get started. I've shared a lot on the podcast recently about my own mental health journey and experiences with depression and anxiety, and I've heard from so many educators who can relate. If you're looking for support, BetterHelp can assess your needs and match you with your own licensed professional therapist. It's not a crisis line or self-help. It is professional counseling done securely online, and it's available to folks worldwide. Through BetterHelp, you can connect with a licensed and accredited counselor who specializes in relationships, trauma, grief, couples counseling, teen counseling, or anything else you'd like support with. You'll be able to log into your account anytime and send a message to your counselor, and you'll get timely and thoughtful responses. BetterHelp is more affordable than traditional offline counseling, and financial aid is available. Visit betterhelp.com/Truth for Teachers. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/Truth for Teachers. That link will get you 10% off your first month of services with our new sponsor, BetterHelp. BetterHelp believes that you deserve to feel happy and supported, and I hope you'll check out their services if you think you might benefit. Today, I wanted to share a mindset strategy that I've been practicing a lot lately, and that is being really intentional with the thoughts that I'm thinking. In a time where there's so much to be sad or upset about, we do have the power to choose thoughts that feel better, and we can actively look for evidence that those thoughts are true and that good things are happening. Now, just to make sure that no one gets this twisted, particularly since this episode is airing right in the middle of my two-part series on critical thinking and fighting fake news, I want to be clear that this is a strategy that involves choosing thoughts based in reality. So I can't just say, COVID isn't real, or all my students are going to get straight A's, or all of my partner's traits that drive me crazy are just going to go away. That's magical thinking. That is a denial of reality. And telling ourselves something that isn't true will probably lead to disappointment and frustration later. So that's not what I'm recommending here. I am not saying to make up your own facts. What I'm saying is to choose your response to the facts. And when your current response is making you feel discouraged or overwhelmed or hopeless, you can choose a response that feels better. So if the facts are that, unfortunately, in your area, you still need to take precautions against COVID in order to be safe and keep your community members safe, you could choose the thought of, I hate this. I am missing out on so many things. This is so unfair. It's never going to get any better. This is never going to go away. You are entitled to choose that interpretation. And I think all of us move in and out of that sometimes, right? We all have moments or days when it just feels like this whole thing is never going to be behind us. However, if you get stuck in that space, it can be really hard to face daily life and have the motivation to teach. So that's a situation in which choosing a new thought could be really useful. So you could choose a thought like, COVID is not going to be interfering with the way I want to live my life and teach my students forever. It will get better. It will not always be just like this. That statement is equally true as the statement about how much you hate it, right? We're not denying the sadness or the anger that you're feeling at all. Those feelings are valid. And so is the feeling that COVID will not always be impacting our lives the way that it is right now. So since both things are true, you can decide which thought produces the kinds of feelings that you want to feel, and try to focus your attention on that thought instead of the one that produces feelings you don't want to be stuck in. Once you choose a better feeling thought, you can then actively look for evidence that the thought is true. And that means when you hear that there's a new variant that is more contagious, but you also hear that the vaccine rollout is going full speed ahead, you can choose to focus on the evidence that helps you maintain that better feeling thought. Focusing on all the possible mutations of this virus for too long can make you feel hopeless again. But looking for evidence that the vaccine is helping and that fewer people are dying or getting severely sick, well, that can give you hope. So that's an example of choosing a better feeling thought and then looking for evidence that helps bolster and strengthen that thought. Let's go to the classroom-based example now. Maybe you're feeling like you're just not meeting the needs of all the students in your class, and you are deeply concerned about where their learning progress is going to be at the end of the school year. I think just about every teacher falls into that category, right? Well, it would be a lie to say that all your students are going to get straight A's. It probably wouldn't be a better feeling thought to think that because it's too disconnected from the facts and evidence that is available to you. If you tell yourself your students are going to get straight A's, you will probably be disappointed later. So you're not going to make up your own reality here. However, you're also not going to focus solely on how far behind some of the kids are going to be. What does that even mean? Behind what? What arbitrary standard do we decide kids are behind? You're also not going to focus only on what will happen if they don't pass a standardized test. That is a depressing thought too. As I've talked about a lot on this podcast, just because something is true, and both of those things may very well be true, that does not mean that it is healthy or worthwhile to dwell on those thoughts. We can acknowledge briefly that there will be kids who have adverse effects on their learning because of the pandemic. We can also choose not to think about that first thing in the morning and to choose a more energizing thought to begin our day instead. We can choose not to think about that right before a parent conference and to choose a more helpful and motivating thought instead. Because it's likely also true that some of your students are actually doing better now than they would be in a traditional classroom during a typical school year. Some of your kids may be struggling academically or socio-emotionally, but not necessarily both. And some are experiencing truly wonderful benefits right now, too. Many of your students will be able to get back on track. That's likely true, too, isn't it? And it's also true that you will not be the only teacher grappling with this problem next school year. The entire country and many other countries around the world will be dealing with how to move kids forward after the disruptions that we've experienced. So this is not your problem alone to solve. You did not create it. It is not your fault. It's a bridge that all of us are going to have to cross when we get there. Can you see how these are better feeling thoughts than half my class is failing and they're never going to catch up? You can choose these better feeling thoughts and then actively look for evidence of them throughout the day. This is something that I used to practice a lot as a teacher, and it changed the way that I handled behavior management in my classroom. So as a new teacher, I used the punitive systems that were very popular at the time, where I was keeping track of all the times that the kids were breaking the rules and issuing this escalating set of consequences for them. And I hated every minute of it. It was extremely depressing to be constantly focusing on all the bad choices that kids were making and writing down all their off-task behaviors. 4/5 of the class could be on task, but my attention was focused on the handful of kids who were off task so that I could record their mistakes and punish them for it. It was an awful way to spend 6 hours of my day, and I cannot imagine that that was super fun or energizing for my students either. So I changed the way that I structured things in my classroom so that I was noticing the positive things kids were doing and calling those things out. I did this through a token economy for a couple of years and then through a bead system that I made up. I used these little triangular beads from a craft store, and I gave each student a pipe cleaner. You know those little fuzzy covered craft wires? And I would just notice my third graders when they were making great choices and compliment them on it. I tell them how proud I was of them, and then sometimes, randomly, I would accompany that compliment with a bead, which they would stack on their pipe cleaner. The kids slowly accumulated the beads over the course of the week as evidence of the great choices they made. On Friday afternoon, when they had free choice time in centers, the kids with the most beads got to pick their centers first. So it wasn't a huge reward, and that was on purpose. I wanted to keep the focus on recognizing kids for their positive choices and giving them tangible evidence of all the awesome stuff they were doing. The point wasn't really to have the most beads or to get a reward for the beads. I wanted them to feel pride in themselves when they looked at that pipe cleaner filling up with beads during each passing day. And I made sure every child in the class had equal opportunities to earn them, since they weren't tied to a standard of perfection. So kids who struggled with work completion, for example, might get a bead just for staying on task. So I'd lean over and whisper to them, "Hey, awesome work this morning. I noticed how focused you were on getting that project complete. And even though you didn't finish it all, you really used your time well, and you should be proud of that." Giving that student a bead was a symbol of that compliment, a symbol of all that hard work. And every time the child looked at that bead, it was a reminder that they'd done a great job. So this helped me not only focus on the good things that most of the class was doing, but also my most challenging students. I was constantly looking for something that I could compliment them on to make sure that they too were earning beads. Now, that's just kind of an aside. This episode is not about behavior management systems, and I don't even know that something like that is necessary or relevant in today's classrooms. That's not really my area of expertise anymore. But I'm sharing it here as an example of how I shifted my focus to what kids were doing right instead of what they were doing wrong. And that totally changed the tone and culture of my classroom, not to mention my own mood and energy levels as a teacher. So even in the years toward the end of my time in the classroom where I was no longer using a reward system at all, I continued my focus on the good things that were happening in the classroom and really worked to draw attention to those things. And that's really what I'm saying here. Instead of constantly thinking about and tracking and trying to remedy all the deficiencies and shortcomings that you notice in students, try focusing on the assets. Try focusing on the things that are going well, the things they are successful with. And when I say focus on, I just mean think about it and talk about it. That's it. Think about it more, talk about it more. So many of our thoughts and conversations about work are complaints. We're venting about all the things that are going wrong, all the things that we don't like. So try to think and talk about some of the things that are going well. Find a better feeling thought. It does not feel good to think and talk endlessly about how terrible students are doing in class or how bad their behavior is. When it gets to that point where you just don't feel good, choose a better feeling thought. And then look for evidence to support that thought. Because you will be able to find evidence to support the idea that your kids are doing terribly, and you'll also be able to find evidence to support the idea that your kids are doing some really incredible things. When you start to feel discouraged and hopeless, look for evidence that those good things are happening. Those good things are there, even in a pandemic. So this is a strategy that you can use anytime you're feeling sad, disappointed, hopeless, or discouraged. And again, it is absolutely fine to feel all of those feelings. In fact, one of the things that I'm realizing more and more as I grow older is that the goal is not to be happy or even content all the time. Glennon Doyle has written about this a lot, that the goal is to feel everything, to feel the grief, to feel the sense of loss, to feel the frustration when those things arise. These are all part of the human experience. If you suppress all of those feelings that we have labeled as bad, then you're not getting the full human experience. And in a way, you're also watering down your joy, because we don't really appreciate joy unless we've also had that sadness. I found that it is a lot less work to lean into those uncomfortable feelings and just allow them to be there, rather than try to chase them away immediately. So this idea of choosing a better feeling thought is something that I go to when I start to notice that I've either been in a low mood for too long and I just don't want to feel like that anymore, or I'm in a low mood unnecessarily. Maybe I just saw something, on social media or on the news that I found upsetting, but it's not my problem to solve. It has nothing to do with me, and I don't need to be thinking about that. Those are times when I may want to choose a better feeling thought. And I use this strategy a lot in my interpersonal relationships, with friends, with family, with my partner. I gave the example earlier about how it doesn't work to try to tell yourself that your partner is perfect and amazing and just, best husband ever, best wife ever, when in fact, they do have shortcomings and flaws. You don't have to keep up that veneer all the time about how amazing they are. I mean, at least I don't find that to be helpful. But I do try to choose the better feeling thought and look for evidence that it's true. My partner, like everyone's partner, and like me, sometimes does things that can feel insensitive. And I will sometimes indulge in thoughts about how insensitive he is and how I wish he would step up in this area, or I wish he was more like this or less like that. But the better feeling thought is that my husband loves me deeply, and I know he wants to make me happy. He doesn't always succeed at that, nor do I always succeed at doing the things that make him happy. But I know his heart toward me is never to disregard my needs or my feelings. And I can then look for evidence that he loves me, and evidence that he cares about my needs, and evidence that he's a helpful, equal partner in this relationship. Now, when we need to have a conversation about something, I don't sweep my feelings under the rug anymore. I don't pretend like it was okay and force myself to only focus on his good traits. I have done that, does not work. What that does is keep the peace around the house for a couple of weeks, and then one tiny thing happens and I blow up. And he's left standing there like, where is this coming from? I had no idea this was a problem. So it's taken me a long time to learn how to speak up and tell him directly what I need and what I would like from him, so that I don't try to convince myself that everything's fine and allow resentment to quietly build. When I speak up and I don't just brush things under the rug, I can then spend the majority of my time focused on the evidence that he loves me and he cares for me and he's a good partner to me, because there's a ton of evidence for that. And it is a better feeling thought than constantly focusing on the things that I wish he did. So my challenge to you is to notice when you are thinking a thought that does not feel good and decide when you are ready to change it. It could be something in your professional life or in your personal life. This works in all different areas. I've given you a lot of different examples here. And you may choose to sit in the discomfort or the sadness or the anger for a while. Those are all valid emotions, and really productive things can come from those emotions. So don't rush the process. But you will know when the thoughts are just too overwhelming and your mood is too low and you're ready to feel better. And that's when you can choose a better feeling thought. Just explore the situation from a couple different angles. Ask yourself, what's another way to look at it? What else might also be true? What might be true about the situation that I hadn't paid attention to before? If I'm telling a story to myself that something is terrible, is there something good that I can find in it? Could another person look at my situation and point out something good? If a friend was feeling how I'm feeling, what alternative perspective could I offer that person? So these kinds of questions are just a few examples of how to train your brain to find these better feeling thoughts. And you can just try each one on for size. Different thoughts will come into your mind, and it's like you're selecting a hat. You don't have to attach a judgment to your thought. It doesn't have to be a good thought or a bad thought. And you don't have to give a passing thought any weight or importance. It's just a thought. Think about it like you're in a store. You're trying on hats or sunglasses or whatever it is that you're into. You just pick one up, you try it on, you see how you like it. If it doesn't suit your mood, if it doesn't suit your personality, then put it back. Try on a different one. And once you've selected that better feeling thought, the one that aligns with how you want to feel, then you can focus on continually looking for evidence that it's true. Notice all of the good things that are happening. Mount up evidence in your head that things are going well, the same way you can easily mount up evidence that things are going badly. You know how to do that. I think we've all had a boss or a colleague or a neighbor that we just could not stand. And it gets to the point where every little thing they do is tabulated in our minds as more evidence about how they're the worst person ever. And we just start thinking thoughts like, there she goes again, or I knew he was going to do that. He always does that. Those kinds of thoughts are natural because our brains are always looking for evidence to confirm our existing beliefs. We believe that this person is the worst, so we easily find more evidence that that's true. We know how to do that intuitively, and we accumulate that evidence over time. So use that natural instinct for your own good. Actively look for evidence that good things are happening. The evidence is there if you choose to see it. Have a great week. You can do this. And remember, it's not going to be easy. It's going to be worth it.